Hello and welcome to Lights Camera News. Things continue to heat up in the United States and the USSR in the Cold War. Europe was divided into East and West, the West supporting democracy and the East supporting communism. Winston Churchill calls it the Iron Curtain. Specialists say that this might just cause more tension between the two powers. The military continues to make nuclear weapons in the arms race between the U.S. and the USSR. Mark Gusto from the U.S. Army says that this mission is to have the most power in the Cold War. Gusto says that the military has spent $178 billion on weapons and militarizing and will continue to do so until the Cold War is over. The U.S. declared space race after the USSR today. The U.S. declared race after the USSR had launched their second satellite into the space called Sputnik 2. The U.S. officials say that they're planning a satellite launch as soon as possible. A U-2 spy plane was shot down today in the USSR. The plane was carrying a pilot named Gary Powers. The President Eisenhower admitted that the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency had been flying spy missions for a while. The USSR military had sentenced the pilot to 10 years in prison. Over in Cuba, the U.S. attack on the Bay of Pigs had failed. The military had trained many soldiers for this planned attack on Castro and his communist revolution. After 3 days of fighting, the U.S. had enough. Over to you, Zach.
Thank you, Jackson. My name is Zachary Anderson, reporting to you on the framework. On June 25th, 1950, the North Koreans crossed the 30th parallel into South Korea. In days, the North Koreans have gone deep into the South, trying to reunite the peninsula. Truman's policy of containment to try to stop communism from spreading south went into effect. By September 1950, the North Koreans controlled all of South Korea, except for a tiny piece of land in the northeast. A total of 15 nations participated under the command of Douglas MacArthur. Now, MacArthur has set up a surprise attack to try to take back South Korea. But shortly after, MacArthur was fired for saying we should start a nuclear war. As the fighting continues, the South pushes the North Korean troops across the 30th parallel. And then the UN troops managed to push the troops to the Yalu River at the Chinese border. After this, the Chinese felt threatened by this, so they sent Chinese troops to the border. Then they entered the war. After the Chinese entered the war, they pushed back the UN troops, and then they captured the city Seoul. After this happened, they decided to sign an armistice. Now there's a DMZ between North Korea and South Korea. Now back to you.
Vietnam has recently been split into two at the 17th parallel, causing Ho Chi Minh is now controlled North Vietnam and turning it communism. No Dien Diem, a non-communist leader, is now controlling the South. The North took the South by surprise and they launched a massive attack on them called the Tet Offense. They bombed major cities, towns, and military bases, and in the end the North got the cities. But the U.S. completely destroyed the North's military. Many Americans feel like this is a loss for the U.S. After North Vietnam attacked the Gulf of Tonkin, the U.S. had to fight back. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution was recently put before Congress by the President. It authorizes the U.S. to take all necessary measures to protect the U.S. forces and stop aggressors. Once it is passed, the U.S. launches a surprise air attack on the North and killed many innocent North Vietnamese citizens. These killings and losing cities to the North is upsetting to U.S. citizens. This caused the President's popularity to take a dive for the worst. The President has decided to take action and turn to Vietnamization. Vietnamization is slowly removing American troops and filling them in with South Vietnamese forces. The U.S. is slowly withdrawn in the war. Over to you, Martin.
I'm here reporting on Cuban Missile Crisis. In October 14, 1962, the U.S.'s very own U-2 spy plane took pictures of a Russian nuclear missile base, and President Kennedy's advisors told me that 10 days before Cuba was ready to fire their missiles at American targets. In 1959, Fidel Castro and Nikita Khrushchev established diplomatic ties, and Cuba became very dependent on Russian supplies. So, on October 16th, Kennedy set up a meeting to advise him about the Russian base. 6 days later, he announced that he was setting up a naval blockade to isolate Cuba. Khrushchev said in defense that it was only to protect Cuba from an aggressor. October 25th, the first Russian ship reached the naval blockade. All ships carrying any missiles got turned back. During this, America secretly agreed to take their missiles out of Turkey for them to remove their missiles from Cuba. When Kennedy was planning on an attack to invade Cuba, Khrushchev sent him a message saying that he would dismantle the bases if we agreed not to invade Cuba. Before Kennedy could reply, Khrushchev sent another letter demanding him to dismantle the nuclear missile bases in Turkey, so Kennedy secretly agreed. When Khrushchev agreed, Kennedy lifted the U.S. naval blockade so the Russian ships could get through, so Khrushchev started dismantling the missile base in Cuba and got publicly humiliated because Kennedy didn't announce the U.S. taking down their site in Turkey. Back to you, Jackson.
Alright, well that's it for today, and we'll see you back here tomorrow on Lights, Camera, News.